It starts with a whisper, the wind weaving through the trees, the shadows stretching longer than they should. In the heart of the forest, where the moonlight barely touches the ground, the air grows colder, thicker, as if the trees themselves are holding their breath. Tonight, we're venturing into the haunted woods, places where reality blurs and the unexplained waits in the darkness. Each of these stories has been whispered around campfires, passed from one weary soul to another, carrying the chill of fear that refuses to fade. Some of these tales are from places you can visit, if you dare, while others remain hidden in remote corners of the world, their locations known only to those who survive the encounters. But all of them share one thing in common. They're true, or as true as the frightened witnesses insist. Our first story takes us deep into the forests of northern Pennsylvania, a dense wilderness that locals call the Shrouded Pines. For decades, hikers and hunters have reported strange lights that dart between the trees at night, small orbs that seem to follow without a sound. One autumn evening, a man named Daniel, a seasoned hunter familiar with every trail in the region, set out just before dusk. He was alone, armed with his camera, and a sense of unease he couldn't quite explain. As he walked, he noticed the forest growing unnaturally silent. The birds had stopped, the wind had stilled. Even the usual rustle of leaves beneath his boots seemed muted. Daniel's first encounter began with a soft glow in the distance. At first, he assumed it was a camper's lantern, but as he drew closer, the light flickered unnaturally, almost like it was breathing. Then he saw them, figures, tall and thin, standing perfectly still among the trees. They were pale, almost translucent, and their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Daniel tried to speak, tried to move, but found his feet frozen as if the forest itself had claimed him. One of the figures raised a hand slowly, pointing toward a narrow path he had never noticed before. Against every instinct screaming to turn back, Daniel stepped onto the path, and the figures vanished. The path led him deeper into the forest, where he found a small, abandoned cabin, its door slightly ajar. Inside, the air was frigid, and scribbled messages covered the walls, warnings in jagged letters. Do not stay. The forest sees. Daniel didn't stay long. As he exited, the figures were gone, the lights extinguished. But when he developed the photographs he had taken, every image of the cabin was blank, except for one, where faint silhouettes could be seen standing behind the doorway, watching. Locals confirmed similar sightings, though most refused to enter after sunset. They whisper that the shrouded pines are alive, and those who linger too long may find themselves guided deeper into places they were never meant to go. Our next tale brings us to the Pacific Northwest, where towering redwoods create an almost cathedral-like darkness beneath their canopy. In this forest, stories tell of the shadow walker, a spirit said to follow those who wander too far from the trail. Claire, a backpacker from Oregon, decided to test the legend one foggy evening. Hiking alone with only a small lantern. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of pine and earth. At first, the night was quiet, almost peaceful. But as darkness swallowed the trail, Claire felt a presence. A shape moved between the trees, slower than a human pace, but deliberate, always staying just at the edge of her vision. She tried to call out, but no sound came. Her breath caught in her throat as the shadow lengthened, twisting unnaturally, stretching toward her. The flashlight in her hand flickered, casting brief, distorted silhouettes across the forest floor. Panic gripped her as she stumbled along the trail, and then she heard it. A whispering voice, soft but urgent, calling her name. It was coming from every direction at once, echoing in the still night. Desperate, Claire ran, tripping over roots, tearing through the underbrush. She emerged onto a familiar clearing hours later, her heart pounding, her lantern smashed. In the morning, the forest appeared ordinary, serene even. Yet she swore for the whispering lingered, fading only as she left the woods behind. Not all haunted woods are defined by spirits seen or heard. Some are marked by a lingering sense of dread, an intangible weight pressing down on anyone who dares to enter. In the Appalachian forests of West Virginia, locals speak of the Weeping Grove, a stand of trees where those who enter hear mournful cries that no one can locate. Samantha, a college student researching local legends, ventured into the grove with friends, armed with audio recorders and cameras. At first, the day was uneventful. The sun filtered through the leaves. Birds chirped as usual, and the grove seemed no different than any other part of the forest. But as twilight approached, the air grew heavier, and the sound began. Soft at first, like a child sobbing in the distance. Samantha's friends laughed nervously, attributing the cries to the wind. But as the minutes passed, the sobbing grew louder, almost pleading, echoing through the trees in impossible directions. They tried to leave, but the path they had followed seemed to twist back on itself. Panic set in. The cries now felt almost right behind them, and in the eerie dimming light, shadows formed between the trunks. Shadowy figures bending and reaching, but with no discernible form. Eventually, they escaped the grove, their nerves frayed and cameras empty of footage. Samantha later claimed that the crying sometimes echoes in her dreams, a haunting memory that the woods themselves will not release. The forest is an ancient place, and sometimes it holds memories older than the people who live nearby. In northern Michigan, near the dense, untraveled stretches of Hiawatha National Forest, stories circulate about the lurking man. Hikers and hunters speak of a tall, cloaked figure appearing without warning, observing silently from a distance. One hunter, Tom, reported seeing the figure sitting on a fallen log, motionless for hours. When he approached, it vanished, leaving no trace, except for footprints that led into a thicket, only to disappear entirely. Tom returned several times, each encounter leaving him increasingly uneasy. The locals claim that those who are too curious often vanish, swallowed by the forest in ways no one can explain. Even in the most modern times, with GPS and cell phones, the woods hold their secrets. People report cars failing to start when parked near haunted trails, phone signals dropping entirely, compasses spinning wildly. These are not just stories. They are warnings passed down for generations. And yet, the allure of haunted woods persists, drawing the curious, the thrill seekers, the skeptics who insist they will prove it's all nonsense, only to find that some legends are rooted in something beyond explanation. If the wind whispers tonight, and the shadows in your room stretch a little too far, remember the woods are patient. They wait. And in the quiet darkness, the line between the natural and the supernatural thins. Some say you can hear the trees breathing, or even the faint, sorrowful echoes of those who never returned. Perhaps you will see a light moving, slow and deliberate, or a shadow that doesn't belong to anything alive. The haunted woods are always watching, and sometimes, just sometimes, they allow you to leave. The night grows thicker as we venture deeper into the tales of haunted forests, each one carrying its own weight of fear and mystery. In the forests of Oregon, there exists a stretch of wilderness known as the Silent Pines. Locals rarely enter this area after sunset, speaking of a silence so complete it becomes deafening. For Marcus, a wildlife photographer, the allure of capturing the untouched beauty of these pines was too strong to resist. He set out at dusk, his camera gear slung over his shoulder, unaware that this forest held more than just trees and wildlife. As Marcus ventured further, he noticed the usual sounds of the forest: birdsong, rustling leaves, distant animal calls, fade into nothing. The wind that had been gentle moments before abruptly ceased, leaving the branches still. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Shadows shifted unnaturally, forming shapes that didn't match the trees around them. Marcus's heartbeat quickened, but he lifted his camera anyway, hoping to capture evidence of something rare. A fox, perhaps, or an owl. But when he looked through the viewfinder, the image was wrong. The trees appeared twisted, bent at impossible angles, and faint, humanoid figures lingered between the trunks. Their faces blurred, yet unmistakably watching him. Marcus lowered the camera, and the figures vanished, melting into the darkness. The silence returned, but now it was heavy, oppressive. He pressed on, instinct battling curiosity, and stumbled upon a small clearing. In its center lay a circle of stones, each one etched with strange symbols that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. As he examined them, he felt a cold breath against the back of his neck. Marcus spun around. Nothing. Yet the sense of being watched intensified, growing so strong that he could no longer tell if it was the forest or something else that bore into him. By the time he left, the pines had regained their ordinary appearance. But Marcus never forgot the shapes in the shadows, nor the way the forest seemed to hum with an unseen presence. From the eerie pines of Oregon, we moved to the haunting redwoods of Northern California, where the Whispering Hollow has long been a source of unsettling stories. Unlike Marcus's silent forest, this one speaks, softly, insistently, carrying whispers that seem both near and impossibly far away. A group of hikers, determined to debunk the legend, ventured into the hollow one autumn evening. At first, everything seemed normal. The trail winding through colossal redwoods, sunlight filtering through high branches, the smell of damp earth. But as they penetrated deeper, the whispers began, unintelligible at first, then gradually forming words. Go away. Not safe. The voice seemed to come from the very trees themselves, echoing in different directions at once. The hikers tried to reason it out, attributing it to the wind, to the echoes of their own voices. Yet the sensation of being followed persisted. Shadows moved between the trunks, small flashes of movement in the corner of their eyes, disappearing when looked at directly. Panic began to set in when one of the hikers, Anna, tripped on a root and landed near an old tree hollow. Peering inside, she glimpsed what looked like a pair of eyes staring back. Large, luminous, unblinking. She recoiled, and the whispers escalated into urgent cries, warning them to leave immediately. The group hurried back to the trailhead, the hollow's whispers fading, but never entirely disappearing. Later, the recordings they had made caught something even more chilling. The voices were not human. The cadence, the tones, even the way the words formed defied any normal pattern of speech, suggesting something alive yet profoundly otherworldly. Some locals claim the hollow is a nexus point, a place where the boundary between the living world and something beyond is unusually thin. Visitors rarely speak of it willingly, fearing that recounting the experience may draw attention to them in ways they do not wish to invite. Traveling eastward, we enter the Appalachian Mountains of Tennessee, home to a forested area known as the Morning Trail. Legend has it that travelers who enter at night hear cries, not just of the lost or sorrowful, but of those who never truly existed. In one chilling account, a young couple, Emma and Josh, set out for a short hike after a local festival. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving them navigating by lantern alone. The trail, initially seemed ordinary, lined with familiar oak and maple tree sequoias. Yet after an hour, the forest grew darker, almost suffocating, and the soft sound of footsteps began to echo there. They stopped, and so did the footsteps, leaving only silence. Relief was short-lived. A faint crying began, rising and falling as though circling them. Emma called out, but the sound returned as a distorted echo, her own voice warped and pleading. Then, just ahead, figures emerged from the trees, pale, transparent, their faces indistinct yet filled with anguish. The couple tried to flee, only to find the trail behind them looping unnaturally. Every familiar landmark twisted into something alien, and the crying voices multiplied, coming from every direction. It took hours of wandering before they found the path back to the festival grounds, exhausted and shaken. Locals still warn that those who wander the morning trail after sunset may encounter echoes of the lost. Never fully real, yet not entirely imagined either. In the forests of New England, particularly Vermont, there is a location referred to simply as the Hollow of Eyes. A man named Paul, an amateur historian, had been investigating old colonial-era maps when he came across references to a forested glen where travelers claimed to feel watched by unseen eyes. Intrigued, Paul embarked on a solo expedition. As he entered the hollow, a sense of unease enveloped him. The leaves seemed unnaturally still, the shadows unusually deep. Paul set up a temporary camp to document the area, placing motion-activated cameras at strategic points. By nightfall, the feeling of being watched intensified. The cameras recorded intermittent flickers of movement not caused by animals, and strange glowing orbs appeared at the edges of the footage. Paul himself felt compelled to avoid eye contact with the darkness around him, as though the forest contained sentient beings that could read fear itself. One night he awoke to find all the cameras turned inward, facing him in their tripod mounts as if observing him, though he had left them pointed outward. Terrified, he left immediately, later swearing he could feel the gaze of countless unseen eyes following him even outside the forest. Finally, we journey to the forests of northern Minnesota, where legends speak of the howling pines. Here, travelers report hearing distant howls that mimic human screams, often following them for miles. Jake, a park ranger, recounts a personal experience. Patrolling alone one foggy night, he heard the first howl and dismissed it as coyotes. But as he moved deeper into the pines, the sound multiplied, growing closer, changing pitch and timbre, as if countless voices were calling out in fear and despair. Shadows moved in the mist, and Jake swore he glimpsed shapes crouched among the trees, watching, waiting. The sounds continued long after he left the forest, sometimes even at his home, echoing in the wind as though the howling pines had followed him beyond its boundaries. The woods hold their secrets carefully, and often those who seek to uncover them find that fear is not just in the mind, it is tangible, almost a living presence, pressing against the skin, whispering just out of comprehension. The forests themselves are characters in these stories, ancient witnesses to events humans may never fully understand. Some are merely eerie, some dangerously haunted, but all share the same lesson. Tread lightly, respect the darkness, and never assume the forest is empty just because no one else is there. In the remote forests of Pennsylvania lies a place ominously called Gravewood Hollow, where the whispers of the past seem to linger among the dense evergreens. Locals tell of travelers vanishing without a trace, their last known steps marked only by the rustle of leaves and faint cries carried on the wind. One chilling account comes from a man named Thomas, a seasoned hiker who prided himself on never being spooked by the supernatural. He set out to camp in Gravewood Hollow during the peak of autumn, when the air was crisp and the forest floor was blanketed with fallen leaves. Initially, the setting was serene, sunlight streaming through the canopy, birds darting from branch to branch, and the gentle murmur of a nearby brook. By nightfall, the atmosphere changed. A low, almost imperceptible hum seemed to fill the hollow, vibrating through the ground beneath him. Thomas chalked it up to his imagination, but the sound grew louder, harmonizing with faint footfalls that did not belong to him. He ventured closer to the source, discovering a clearing surrounded by gnarled oaks. In the center stood a figure, barely discernible in the moonlight. Tall, thin, and unnervingly still. Thomas froze, feeling the weight of countless unseen eyes upon him. He raised his flashlight, but the figure vanished instantly, leaving behind only a chill that settled deep in his bones. The following day, Thomas noticed strange markings on the trees, symbols he could not identify, etched deeply into the bark. They seemed to pulse faintly when he looked directly at them. Although he left the hollow immediately, he reported that the symbols appeared in his dreams for weeks afterward, a haunting reminder that Gravewood Hollow did not easily relinquish its secrets. Locals now insist that anyone who enters after dusk risks more than just fear. They risk the attention of something ancient, something that feeds not on flesh, but on the terror itself. Meanwhile, in the forests of Michigan, Shadow Creek has earned a reputation as a place where travelers hear the voices of the lost. Jenna, a college student, ventured there one summer evening with friends, drawn by tales of spectral sightings and eerie phenomena. Initially, their hike was filled with laughter and storytelling. But as darkness fell, the creek seemed to take on a life of its own. Water that had been gently flowing became eerily still, reflecting not just the moonlight, but distorted ghostly shapes lurking along the bank. Jenna and her friends began hearing whispers, sometimes calling their names, sometimes issuing warnings in languages none of them understood. Panic set in when one friend, Liam, wandered toward a faint light flickering deep in the woods. The light pulsed as if alive, and when Liam approached, the surrounding air grew heavy, pressing against his chest. A shadow shot from the trees, enveloping him, and the group heard a scream unlike any human voice. They ran, the whispers escalating into frenzied cries as they stumbled back to the trailhead. Even after leaving Shadow Creek, Jenna reported hearing faint whispers following her for nights afterward, as though the forest itself had marked her presence. In the Pacific Northwest, the dense rainforests of Washington conceal a location known as the Black Pines. Here, legends speak of an entity called the Weeping Man, a tall figure with hollow eyes that emerges on foggy nights. Alex, a documentary filmmaker, ventured into these woods hoping to capture evidence for his next project. Equipped with cameras and night vision equipment, he began filming as dusk fell. At first, everything seemed ordinary. The wind whispered through the pines, and occasional animal sounds punctuated the stillness. But as the fog thickened, Alex noticed the first anomaly: trees swaying despite the calm air, shadows stretching in impossible directions, and a faint, wet sound resembling sobbing. Hours passed, and the fog thickened to an almost tangible curtain. Then he saw it, a figure standing motionless between two towering pines. The face was obscured by darkness, but the sound, a low, mournful wail, sent shivers down his spine. Alex raised his camera, and the figure vanished, leaving only footprints in the soft earth that seemed to lead nowhere. The footage revealed more than he expected. Brief, distorted images of figures moving at impossible speeds, appearing and disappearing within frames that lasted only a fraction of a second. Alex later admitted that while he initially sought evidence, he had never felt more vulnerable or afraid in his life. And he swore never to return to the Black Pines at night. Traveling south, the forests of North Carolina conceal the Hollow of Whispers, a place notorious among locals for disorienting even experienced hikers. A man named Samuel recounted his experience, describing how a casual hike turned into a nightmare. As he entered the hollow, the trees seemed denser than expected, their canopies forming a shadowy labyrinth. Samuel soon realized that the path he thought he knew twisted and warped, loops forming where none existed before. Strange murmurs filled the air, sometimes resembling conversations, sometimes only the sound of heavy breathing. Then came the shadows, human-shaped but moving unnaturally, sometimes against the wind or gravity, their faces distorted and shifting. Samuel tried to call out, but his voice echoed back as something unrecognizable, distorted into a chilling mimicry. Hours passed, or what felt like hours, before he found the edge of the forest. He left shaken, with the sense that something had followed him, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the moment he would return. Locals warn that those who enter the Hollow of Whispers risk not just fear, but a permanent mark upon their psyche, as if the forest claims a piece of their very soul. In the remote corners of Kentucky lies the Devil's Grove, a forest thick with cedar and oak, where numerous disappearances have been recorded over decades. Emma, a seasoned hiker, ventured there alone despite the warnings. She noticed early on that the birds were silent, and even the wind seemed reluctant to stir the branches. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and the ground beneath her feet felt almost springy, as if alive. Soon, she began hearing distant chanting, low, rhythmic, and eerily human. Following the sound led her to a small clearing, where stones were arranged in a pattern that seemed almost ceremonial. Emma felt an icy presence brush past her, and she turned to see a figure standing just beyond the clearing, face concealed in shadow. The chanting ceased instantly, replaced by an oppressive silence. She fled, never looking back, yet claimed that for weeks afterward she could hear faint chants whenever she was alone, a spectral echo of her night in the Devil's Grove. In the forests of Maine, there exists a place called the Phantom Woods, a location long rumored to be haunted by spirits of travelers who never returned. A group of campers, seeking adventure, set out one evening, unaware of the history. At first, the forest seemed inviting, the smell of pine and earth calming. But as darkness fell, an unnatural fog enveloped the campsite, and strange shapes moved just beyond the circle of their lantern light. The campers began to hear faint laughter, not human in tone, echoing through the trees. One camper, Mark, ventured to investigate and was met with a sudden, piercing scream that seemed to emanate from all directions at once. Shadows darted between the trees, figures appearing and vanishing within the fog. The campers fled, guided only by instinct, and some claim that those who returned found scratches on their arms and clothing, as if the forest itself had marked them. In the heart of Oregon lies the infamous Whispering Pines, a forest where the wind seems to carry voices from beyond. Locals tell of hikers who vanish, only to reappear days later, disoriented and unwilling or unable to speak of what they experienced. One story that circulates widely is that of Lydia, a nature photographer who often sought solitude to capture the forest's raw beauty. She entered Whispering Pines on a crisp autumn morning, drawn by the vibrant colors of the changing leaves. The forest seemed almost alive, each rustle of leaves a note in a symphony of subtle sounds. At first, Lydia felt at peace, the forest an inspiring muse. By late afternoon, a sudden shift occurred. The birds fell silent, and the usual hum of insects faded, leaving an oppressive quiet. Lydia noticed faint shapes moving among the trunks, too deliberate to be animals. Shadows lingered just beyond her vision, vanishing when she turned to face them. A low murmur began to fill the air, a string of whispers that grew louder as the sun dipped below the horizon. Despite her logical mind, Lydia felt an undeniable pull deeper into the forest, as if invisible hands guided her steps. Eventually, she stumbled upon an abandoned cabin, hidden among the trees, its windows broken and roof caving in. Drawn by a mixture of curiosity and fear, she stepped inside, immediately overwhelmed by a stale, cold air that seemed to suck warmth from her bones. Inside, the walls were covered with strange symbols, etched deep into the wood. As Lydia approached, the whispers crescendoed into unintelligible chants, vibrating through the floorboards beneath her feet. She turned to leave, only to find the door no longer aligned with the outside world. It now opened into an endless darkness. Panic surged as the forest seemed to stretch infinitely beyond the cabin. She barely escaped, fleeing into the fading daylight. But she claims to this day that she still hears the whispers whenever the wind rustles through the trees. Further south in Alabama, Shadow Grove is notorious for eerie phenomena that defy logic. Travelers report sudden drops in temperature, ghostly apparitions, and sounds that echo unnaturally. Marcus, an amateur paranormal investigator, ventured into Shadow Grove one night, equipped with infrared cameras and recording devices. At first, the forest appeared typical, though densely overgrown. But within an hour, Marcus began hearing distant cries that grew closer and more insistent. When he turned his flashlight toward the sound, he saw a figure standing between two oak trees. Tall, humanoid, yet its limbs seemed unnaturally elongated. As Marcus approached, the figure vanished, leaving only a faint residue of cold air. Reviewing his footage later revealed more than he had experienced firsthand. Fleeting shadows darting across the frames, whispers captured on audio that were not audible at the time, and a fleeting image of a pale face with hollow eyes staring directly into the camera. Marcus admitted that although he had entered Shadow Grove seeking proof of the paranormal, the experience left him questioning the boundaries between reality and the supernatural. Locals now warn visitors to avoid the grove after dark, insisting that those who enter risk being drawn into forces beyond comprehension. In the forests of Georgia, the eerie hollow has long been the subject of local folklore. Travelers recount tales of a ghostly figure known as the Lady in White, said to appear near the forest's edge during foggy nights. Daniel, a history student intrigued by local legends, ventured into Eerie Hollow with the hope of documenting this apparition. He explored during twilight, the air thick with mist and the scent of damp leaves. As darkness fell, he noticed a faint glow ahead, and as he approached, the Lady in White materialized, an ethereal figure with flowing garments, her face obscured by shadows. Daniel froze, captivated and terrified. The figure did not move toward him, but seemed to radiate a sorrowful presence, as if silently communicating a story of loss and despair. Before he could react, the lady vanished, leaving only a lingering chill in the air. Daniel later reported recurring dreams of the lady in white, each dream more vivid than the last, depicting moments of tragedy and warning. Eerie Hollow, he realized, was not just haunted by spirits. It was a place where grief and memory took form, a liminal space between the living and the dead. In Missouri, the Twilight Thicket is a forested area famed for strange disappearances and ghostly sightings. Claire, a geologist conducting fieldwork, ventured into the thicket during the summer to study plant species. Initially, the forest was a scientific wonder, filled with unique flora and wildlife. However, as she delved deeper, she noticed an unsettling pattern. Every clearing contained a circle of stones, carefully arranged with ash and remnants of old fires. The deeper she went, the more pronounced the strange sensations became. Her compass spun wildly, electronic devices malfunctioned, and the air seemed heavy, almost sentient. One evening, Claire witnessed a figure in the distance, a silhouette of a person moving backwards, as if walking through invisible forces. She followed cautiously, documenting the occurrence, but each step seemed to disorient her further. The forest appeared to shift, trees rearranging themselves, paths looping upon themselves. Eventually, Claire found herself back at the edge of the thicket, the circles of stones still visible, though no trace of the figure remained. Even months later, she reported feeling eyes upon her when alone, as though the forest continued to watch. A silent sentinel of secrets it was unwilling to share. In the remote forests of New York, Hollow Creek is infamous for chilling encounters. Hikers frequently report strange mists that appear without warning, carrying voices that seem both familiar and alien. Jacob, an outdoor enthusiast, recounted his experience. Venturing into Hollow Creek with friends, they found the trail forked into paths that appeared and disappeared inexplicably. As night descended, an unnatural fog enveloped the area. Shapes flitted within the mist, humanoid but distorted, moving with uncanny speed. The friends heard whispers calling their names, sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening. Jacob attempted to lead the group out, but the paths seemed to loop endlessly. Panic set in as shadows closed in, growing longer and darker with every step. One friend vanished entirely, leaving only a scream that echoed through the fog. By dawn, the remaining hikers emerged, disheveled and terrified. Jacob swore he could still hear the faint echo of that scream days afterward, a ghostly imprint left by Hollow Creek, reminding all who dared enter that the forest was not merely trees and earth, but a realm where reality bends and fear takes form. Deep in the forests of Pennsylvania lies Blackwood Hollow, a place whispered about in hushed tones among locals. The hollow is known for strange lights that hover in the trees at night, moving in ways that defy physics, and for sudden chills that descend without warning. Rachel, a graduate student studying folklore, decided to investigate after hearing multiple accounts from residents claiming to have seen ghostly figures and experienced inexplicable disappearances. She entered Blackwood Hollow at dusk, her notebook and recording equipment in hand, eager to document the supernatural firsthand. At first, the forest seemed serene, with golden rays of sunlight streaming through the canopy. Birds sang, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, creating an illusion of calm. Rachel made her way deeper, noting the eerie absence of wildlife. No bird song, no rustling of small animals. The air became thicker, heavier, almost tangible. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the path, bending and twisting in ways that seemed to mock the laws of light and space. Then she heard it. Faint whispers, soft and melodic, but distinctly human. They called her name, beckoning her further into the woods. Despite rational thoughts telling her to leave, Rachel pressed on, guided by a mixture of curiosity and dread. The whispers grew louder, forming words she could almost understand, fragments of sentences filled with longing and warning. Eventually, she stumbled upon a clearing where the trees seemed to circle around a central point, forming a natural cathedral of sorts. In the middle stood a single gnarled tree, its bark blackened and twisted. Rachel felt a presence, something ancient and watchful, radiating from the tree itself. Suddenly, she saw movement, a shadowy figure gliding between the surrounding trees. It did not approach directly, but circled the clearing, its form flickering as if it existed partially in another dimension. Rachel froze, unable to tear her eyes away. The figure seemed to observe her, its presence overwhelming yet oddly sorrowful. Then it vanished, leaving an emptiness that felt alive, as though the forest itself were holding its breath. Shaken, Rachel retraced her steps, noticing that the whispers had ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence. Yet even as she exited Blackwood Hollow, she carried with her the sense of being watched, a lingering reminder that some places are marked by forces beyond human comprehension. Far to the west, in the forests of California, Crescent Pines is infamous for its eerie tales. Hikers and campers speak of strange lights and sudden gusts of wind that knock down even the sturdiest of trees. A man named Thomas, an avid outdoorsman, ventured into Crescent Pines with a group of friends for a weekend camping trip. They arrived at dusk, the sky painted in shades of crimson and gold. The first evening was uneventful, filled with laughter and the usual sounds of nocturnal wildlife. But as darkness fell, Thomas noticed a faint glow emanating from the distant trees. Curiosity got the better of him, and he approached, leaving his friends at the campsite. The glow revealed a clearing bathed in an unnatural light, with shadows twisting across the ground. Thomas swore he saw figures moving just beyond the glow, their shapes humanoid but elongated, almost ethereal. He attempted to communicate, calling out, but only whispers returned, echoing from nowhere. The figures retreated as he stepped closer. Yet, he felt an intense pressure in the air, a sensation that seemed to bend reality itself. Thomas eventually fled, returning to his friends, who found him shaken, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. Even now, he avoids crescent pines, warning others of the forest's inexplicable forces. In Kentucky, Whistler's Woods has earned a reputation as one of the most haunted forests in the region. Visitors report hearing phantom whistles, often at night, accompanied by the sensation of being followed. One story that persists involves a young boy named Caleb who went missing for 3 days. He had wandered into Whistler's Woods chasing after a lost dog, only to return disoriented, claiming that he had been guided by a friendly man who lived among the trees. Caleb described the man as tall and shadowy, always just out of full view, whispering warnings about staying too long in the woods. Even as he recounted his tale, his parents noted a profound change in him, a new quietness, an awareness of things unseen. Caleb's story, passed down through local newspapers and campfire tales, continues to caution families and adventurers alike. Whistler's Woods is no ordinary forest. Those who enter may encounter beings or forces that defy explanation, and leaving safely is never guaranteed. Meanwhile, in Michigan, the Crimson Thicket presents another unsettling chapter in haunted wood lore. Hikers report sudden mists that appear without cause, often taking on shapes reminiscent of people they know or have lost. Lisa, a freelance writer, ventured into the thicket, hoping to document these phenomena. As evening fell, she noticed shadows moving unnaturally, their forms ambiguous, yet distinctly human. Then came the voices, soft whispers that turned into wailing cries. Lisa felt an invisible pressure, a pull, as if the forest itself sought to hold her within its boundaries. She fled, but the memory of the forest's touch, the sensation of being gently guided and menaced simultaneously, stayed with her for months. Across the Appalachian region, Ravenwood Forest is equally infamous. Tales recount sudden fogs, eerie lights, and whispers that seem to come from nowhere. One evening, a group of friends set out to camp within the forest, seeking adventure and thrill. As night deepened, the fog rolled in, thick and impenetrable. The friends noticed shapes flitting between the trees, sometimes humanoid, sometimes not. Panic set in when one member disappeared, leaving only a scream echoing through the fog. They fled, disoriented, realizing too late that the forest seem to trap them within looping paths, only releasing them at dawn. Finally, in the dense woods of North Carolina, Silent Hollow remains a chilling location where nature and the supernatural intertwine. Locals speak of travelers who hear cries for help, only to find no one present. Shadows move in corners of vision, and an oppressive silence descends without warning. Emma, a hiker drawn to legends, experienced this firsthand. As she ventured deeper, the air grew colder, the forest quieter. Whispers rose and fell like waves, forming phrases she could not understand. She glimpsed figures darting between the trees, but each time she looked directly, they vanished. Emma barely escaped, carrying the imprint of Silent Hollow's eerie presence forever. These 10 haunted woods, scattered across the United States, share a chilling commonality. Each is a place where nature and the supernatural merge. Whether it is whispering trees, shadowy figures, or inexplicable phenomena, the experiences documented by those who dared enter suggest that some forests are not merely backdrops for adventure. They are living, breathing entities, imbued with stories and spirits that defy rational explanation. For those seeking thrill or curiosity, the woods offer a warning. Tread carefully, for once you step inside, the forest may never truly let you go.